Welcome, Becca, to the Higher Alignment podcast. I'm super excited for our conversation today, and because I've been following your content for a while. And what I really like about your approach is A, you're direct, and B, you give people like tangible things to actually like look at as far as identifiers and what's going on. And like there's one in particular post I was thinking about, and I think you were talking about like where fat shows up on your body and what that's an indicator of. And why I appreciate that so much is we're in a world now, whether it's good or bad or indifferent, where everyone just kind of wants quick, tangible results. And that is a way though to still give people the information in a way where they can process it with the kind of monkey brains we have right now by being overstimulated, but it also brings awareness into their body. So I'm a
Yeah,
fan and I'm so happy you're
thank you.
here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. I'm a business owner myself, and I have reached close to burnout, if not at burnout, multiple times in my past. So I appreciate everything that you do for people and people like us
Mm,
that oftentimes don't have our best interests at hand ourselves.
yeah.
We stay very head down and kind of ignore signs and signals that things are not well. So thank you for what you do too. It is very much so needed.
Well, I appreciate the kind words and even just what you said, it's kind of a good segue into my first question because I deal with executives who are going through a period of burnout, and I deal with men and women, but obviously we're going to be talking about more the female side of things today with hormones. But um, I wanted to get your perspective on this to start because we kind of talked about this offline just beforehand. Like there's so many hacks out in the world right now that can help people with burnout or with weight loss or body management or whatever the case is. And like, tell me what your perspective is on healing versus weight loss, or how they have to be in alignment for that to even work. And I guess
Yeah.
I'll preface this by saying, like, I don't know one woman who's ever fully satisfied with her body. You know what I mean? And like it's kind of sad to say out loud, but you know what I mean? Or at least has gone through a period of not being satisfied with her body. And I think, most of the times it's we want to lose weight or we want to get more fit. I'm sure there's some women who deal with they want to gain weight as well too. But you know, when I'm talking about stress and management and burnout with people, I always say like the hacks won't work unless you're fixing the behavior, unless you're fixing the root cause as to how you got there in the first place. And so, from your perspective, like I have seen many of my clients who come in and who are obsessed with weight loss, who are obsessed with high intensity, who are obsessed with anti aging. And I see how that's actually adding to their burnout and not supporting the body to do so.
Yeah.
So, what is your experience or your perspective when it comes to making sure those things align?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with really complex cases in our practice. People that have done everything, they have seen all the doctors, all the practitioners, and there's a really common trend that we see among the cases because a lot of people come in with a lot of symptoms. It's not just weight loss resistance, but it's usually for most women a piece of it. Like, we get their gut moving better, we get them pooping daily, we get them without pain when they eat, we get them sleeping, and then they're like, oh, but I still want to lose weight, right? It's always in the back of their mind. And so something that we see consistently is that most often weight that women are struggling with, especially in that, late 30s, 40s, 50s timeframe, is not so much body fat as it is swelling. So a lot of these women are actually inflamed. Like their weight that they're holding on to is mostly water, because we also see it a lot of times come off pretty rapidly without harsh dieting or anything really extreme that may cause it to come off really quickly. And why this happens, I think, is important to understand. So when the body is in a state of dysfunction, right, whether that is you're constipated, bloated, food sensitivities, you're dealing with headaches, you're not sleeping well, you have way too much on your plate, the typical executive, the typical type A personality, you typically end up in this state of immunological activation. So if you think about, I bring it back to always like, if you think about getting sick, right? When you encounter a virus or a bacteria or something of that nature, your body flags it, and then our body creates an immune response to it. And that immune response has one side that creates antibodies. Antibodies, when overproduced by B cells, can turn into autoimmunity. And then the other side of the immune system creates T cells. T cells basically gobble up affected cells in the body and kind of self suicide, create like this inflammation. They're like, hey, the cell that was affected by the pathogen, the bacteria, the virus, I need to kill it or remove it from the body. And so I'm going to gobble it up, and then I'm going to kind of implode. And then the body has to go around and clean that up. It needs to clean up the antibodies, or, address the antibodies, put it in its memory vault for the next time it encounters that. And then it needs to clean up the inflammation that got caused, right? So it's this beautiful mechanism of the immune response that should happen when you get sick. The problem is that bacteria or virus doesn't always have to be a bacteria or a virus. The immune system can respond to chronic stress. The immune system can respond to psychological stress. So there doesn't even need to be an actual physical thing affecting the body. You can create this immune response from trauma, from never slowing down, from, fill in the blank, right? And so what did I say? I said that we create this inflammatory response to the body. Unfortunately, if you never calm down, if you are always under eating, you're always training without rest days, and on top of that, you're a mom, you have, an executive job or a really high demanding job that's working 60 hours a week, you never bring in any type of self-care or de-stressing things into your day. Well, unfortunately, now you create what we call an overactive immune system. And this immune system, basically think of like the Tasmanian devil just running rampant internally, creating all of this inflammation. And unfortunately, your immune system doesn't discriminate. It will go all throughout the body. And the other challenging thing about the immune system is it's really hard to measure. And so that's why autoimmunity is typically per gland. Like, you can test a gland a lot easier than you can test an entire system. And so that's why people will see like Hashimoto's is very common, right? Rheumatoid arthritis or other systemic autoimmunities can be tested with an ANA, but you can't test the immune system as a whole very easily. And so people get inflamed, and then these symptoms start piling on, and they're still continuing to try to diet. They're still continuing to try to exercise. But unfortunately, that's creating more of a stress on the body that it can adapt to positively, because those are great things to do. But if your body's super stressed out, you can't adapt to that positively. And so it's just going to add to the stress bucket that's going to continue to perpetuate this inflammation response and continue to keep you gaining weight or unable to lose weight. Because again, it's not a body fat problem. It is an inflammatory problem. And so we see it really commonly with people that are high stress, and or there was some type of a catalyst, right? And it's usually not one thing, but we've seen this a lot post-COVID. Because the virus of COVID was a lot different than anything we've encountered before. And it created this trigger to the immune system. And some people genetically do not calm down the immune system very well. I'm one of those people. So I've experienced this from all of my stress in the past. I turn on inflammation very easily, and my body struggles to turn it off. And there's specific genes that do that. And a lot of my genes that do that are blocked and mutated. And so I have to be very careful, and I keep things in place to really manage my inflammatory system, because otherwise I will blow up like a balloon if I take things too far, if I work too hard, if I don't take enough rest days. And so there's a lot of moving pieces to each specific case, but that's kind of the general comprehension of the system of inflammation, and why most of these people that are struggling with weight, they're doing everything right. I know they are, because I watch them. They come in, they're eating healthy already, they're already doing exercise, and they're still puffy as all heck, and they can't drop weight. And so that's what we see as like a really common trend, and why it comes back to stress. It comes back to what is stressing the body. Yes, could it be a virus? Of course it can. It can be a piece of it, but it's always more than that. It's not just Lyme disease or mold or, whatever it might be, fill in the blank. There's always more to it. And usually stress is a big player.
Okay, there's so much you said there I have questions about, but one piece I want to go back to is so you mentioned that there can almost be like, so can your what's the word I'm looking for? Like your turn points of inflammation, as you say, like how you refer to the fact that you have to really monitor that because that switches pretty quick. Can that change throughout your life? Because I think that's also one thing a lot of women, like most of my clients are in their, 30s, 40s plus. And like you mentioned, there could be things like perimenopause and all these things at play. But I think sometimes and I've gone through this myself, the biggest thing is like you used to burn fat your body responded a certain way in your 20s, and then all of a sudden when you hit your 30s things start to shift. But as you're saying too, it sometimes it's just this inflammation switch that can do that. So can you talk to me a little bit more about that and what
Yeah.
that exactly means and how that plays out?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of an accumulation effect to this, right? So, like in your 20s, you're just more resilient. Your thyroid typically is pretty functional and optimized. Your hormones are pretty robust for most females. You don't have the accumulated stress of like you've had multiple kids and that's gone through periods of sleep deprivation. And like it just kind of builds up. We don't get a groundhog day every day where we wake up and we have a fresh slate, right? Like things accumulate in the system. And coming back to the immune system kind of explanation I gave earlier, I mentioned those T cells and how they basically can create inflammation and those unhealthy or dead cells that the T cells create can sit there and they can create their own inflammation then. They're called immunosenescent cells. They're basically zombie cells. So once the immune system has addressed them and attacked them, they need to be cleared. But if they keep accumulating at a rate that we can't clear, they now become their own inflammatory producers. So you basically just have this like inflammation factory internally unless you clear those things, which we can talk about how we do that in our practice and ways that you can do that. But the other big thing is that as you lose hormone levels as you age, which is just naturally the way of life for females, hormones act as kind of a buffer to the body, right? I consider them like a brake pad or like a barrier. And so when you start to lose hormone levels, you basically lose resiliency. Like it's kind of like a bulletproof vest that you walk around with. And when you have no more, progesterone starts to decline and we become a lot more sensitive to emotional changes. We become more estrogen dominant. And these fluctuations that happen with hormones can also trigger immune responses. So I always explain perimenopause as it's technically an immunological event because as estrogen drops, your immune system becomes triggered because the immune cells have estrogen receptors all over them. And so fluctuations in those hormones trigger immune responses. And so perimenopause itself can be an immune trigger, which is another whole beast in and of itself. But the bigger piece is the accumulation aspect, right? Like, have you taken care of your body? Were you on birth control for a decade? Were you chronically under eating, or did you go through periods of eating enough and sleeping enough and caring for your body, right? Have you watched your blood work in your labs and made sure that things have stayed in consistently a good place? Or are you depleted? Are you nutrient depleted, right? Are all of those things happening and then we lose hormones and now it's a really big mess, right? So I think that people underestimate the impact of their lifestyle choices and how much it can kind of wear its burden by the time you hit your late 30s, early 40s. So that's what I see as a bigger problem. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, and something that a lot of people don't realize is like when you're chronically overtraining. So I competed in CrossFit for a really long time and I lost my period for about 3 years. And what people don't realize is I basically created a menopausal state doing that. And I was 22 years old. And so I was essentially menopausal levels of hormones at the age of early 20s, which is not healthy for a female body. So I know for me that definitely took its toll. And I think that there's a lot of women out there that are walking around really low hormone because of under eating, overtraining, chronic stress, whatever it might be. And you essentially mimic a menopausal state, which comes with its own problems too.
Yeah, and just I love what you said about we downplay the impact of our lifestyle choices. And like, I mean, that's a whole rabbit hole. We could talk about hours for that alone, but we're constantly overstimulated. We have so many options at our disposal. And the thing is like when you're constantly overstimulated, then you want the easiest choice. Right? Like that's just the reality of the nervous system, right? When it's already heightened, when it's already in fight or flight, like what's the easiest thing to give me some relief, whether it's some sugar, some alcohol, the screen, whatever it is, right? But then it's so normalized now because everyone is dealing with it to some varying degree where it's like doing the opposite, being out in nature, the simple things are actually like more foreign to people right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And and as you're talking, it's like, no wonder we're dealing with such disconnect internally, because it's like our outer world. I mean, they work hand in hand, but it's just, yeah, it just when you said that, it's like we really do downplay it. And but I also think, with the people I'm working with too, is like people are dealing with so many things that they don't even have the capacity to think about how these little micro things that are compounding day after day after day are actually playing out in their life. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And how it's affecting that. And even just, and I want to ask about this too, just even realizing how many women don't understand their cycle,
I
right?
know.
And I'll be one of the first to admit that I didn't understand it for many years too. Like, it wasn't really until I got off birth control, I was one of those people who was on it for 10 plus years, did I realize, like, wow, what kind of days did I just put my body in? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then from there, exploring that, and like, um, yeah, and maybe you could just speak on that for a little bit about like what you see as far as um what women are really missing in that aspect. Like, I
Yeah.
think a lot of women don't even understand the phases of your period, right? And how that
Hmm.
goes. But just how do you see that, or what do you see as the biggest challenge, or maybe piece of information women are missing when it comes to understanding their cycle?
Yeah. Well, I'd love to really fast we come back to kind of the exposures that we have chronic. We call it dopamine deafness, basically. So people, we are a society of instant gratification. We are a society of, I need my next hit, whether it's caffeine, whether it's exercise, whether it's whatever. Um, and it starts to create a really dysfunctional feedback loop in the gut and the brain. And it can cause its own physical and vice versa. So, like, you can end up with a lot of physical problems that can create mental problems. So, a lot of people think they have ADHD, anxiety, depression, when in reality, it's more physical that's causing this feedback loop, because you have the gut brain axis that's feeding information constantly back and forth. And then you can also create symptoms physically because of the mental piece. But at the end of the day, like, we have gotten to a place where we are so um, insensitive to dopamine, and it's creating a lot of physical problems for people. So the more you can do like little dopamine detoxes and put your phone away on a Sunday, and, go outside in nature and ground yourself. And I know it seems simple, but deep breathing, even just like gratitude journaling. I don't know. I always say, like, it doesn't have to be God. For me, it's God, but like there needs to be some higher power for people, I think, because when there's not, you rely ultimately on yourself as your God, and that's a really slippery slope to live within. So whatever it is that you find grounding to you, that disconnect has to happen, because you will just get more and more down this slide of nothing brings you joy anymore, because you have basically created this resilience to dopamine's effect. Um, but back to the question around our cycle. So I encourage everyone and anyone to use some type of a free period tracking app. Like, the day that you start your period, you click on the little button, say period started today, and then period ended on whatever day, and then it goes until the next day of your bleed, right? Because the whole normal cycle, it can vary, right? It's going to vary person to person, but in general, most females up until that perimenopause timeframe should have a cycle that's around 27 to 30 days long, meaning from the first day of your bleed to the next first day of your bleed should be about 27 to 30 days. And it should be consistent. It should be within a day or two, either side of that, number, consistently month over month, and the symptoms should be consistent. I don't really believe in symptom-free cycles. I think that a lot of women think that you should just like breeze through your period like it's nothing. You should never have any symptoms. I don't really fully agree with that. You are female. You are going, I actually just recorded a reel. There's about a 20 to 30% increase in size of your endometrial tissue and uterus leading into your period. It's why you feel bloated, and why you hold on to a little bit of water, and why you have some cramps. Like, all of those are very normal. With that being said, you should not have debilitating periods. You should not be bleeding through a super tampon in an hour. You should not be having to lay on a heating pad every day for the week leading into your period. You should not be so moody that you're going to leave your family the week before your period. Like, none of those things should be happening, but you should know it's coming. Like, you should be a little bit more tired. You should have a little bit less creativity, which happens in the second half of your cycle. So essentially, from day one of your period. So the first day that you bleed is when your body is at the lowest hormone levels ultimately. So you are shedding the endometrial and the uterine lining, and your body is basically building itself up for ovulation and holding of a pregnancy. But the period is, you aren't pregnant. We're going to shed this lining that would have otherwise stored a pregnancy, and we're going to start over. And so the first, days 1 through 3-ish are pretty low hormone. And then around day 4 or 5, estrogen starts to come back online a little bit. Some people, if they're really estrogen sensitive or have issues with estrogen detox, can experience symptoms around then. So they have like headaches, they'll have histamine responses, things like that, but you shouldn't. The period should be pretty uneventful. You might have a day or two of a little bit heavier bleeding, but again, you should be able to get through the night without bleeding through a tampon. You should be able to go a couple hours without having to change your tampon. That is a normal bleed, but there should be some level of bleed. Too low of hormones, you won't bleed very much, and that's not good either. So your period should last around 4 to 5, maybe 6 days. And then you are in a state where estrogen is starting to rise. And estrogen is your feel-good hormone. You have good insulin sensitivity with estrogen, so you tend to handle carbohydrates better. You also tend to handle stress better with estrogen on the rise, and you're typically stronger with estrogen on board. And so that happens until estrogen peaks around ovulation. And that's usually around day 13, 14, 15, 16. It kind of varies. Some people ovulate earlier, some people ovulate later. And you can track this with your temperature. So if you get a basal thermometer or an Oura ring or whatever you want to use, and you just take your temperature first thing in the morning when you wake up, it should be around 97.2, 97.3 or higher. If you are lower than that, we typically have a thyroid that's struggling, we have hormones that are struggling, and we have a metabolism that's struggling. So it can be a great indicator of metabolically where you're at. But as soon as temperature starts rising, reaches its peak, that's kind of that ovulation time frame. And then temperature should hold in the second half of your cycle. So estrogen peaks, we ovulate, and then estrogen drops and progesterone starts rising. Progesterone is there to hold a pregnancy if there is one, right? Progesterone is also very calming. It can be sedative, and it can be very overall just kind of chill. So usually in this phase, you're not as creative. And I always remind myself in this, leading into my period, I don't want to film reels. I don't want to come up with reels. I don't want to create content. I'm not feeling creative in that time of my cycle, which is very normal. And I give myself grace. You typically are not going to feel as strong in that part of your cycle, and you're just not going to handle stress as well. And so I always tell people, chill out a little bit in the gym. Sometimes cycle syncing your workouts can be helpful. So maybe you go a little bit higher reps, a little bit lower intensity in terms of weights, shorter rest periods, and do more hypertrophy cardio based in the second half of your cycle, and just lift heavier and stronger in the first half. That's a great thing that a lot of women can do. Take more rest days, sleep more, all of that's fine. Some women do not clear their hormones very well. Those are the women that typically have a lot of symptoms leading into their period. So we find that those are the ones that don't detox as well. So their estrogen builds up a little bit, gets kind of backed up, and can cause a lot of worsening of symptoms. So those are the people that cramps are really bad. Sometimes we'll experience actually nausea or vomiting. Those are really extreme cases. They'll have headaches. They'll have, sleep will be all messed up. So when that's going on, we look, right? Do we have adequate levels of progesterone? Are we clearing our hormones very well? Sometimes I'll bring in a DIM or a calcium D-glucarate to help estrogen clear. Magnesium helps with lowering prostaglandins, which are basically inflammatory messengers that your uterine lining releases when you are leading into your period. Can cause a lot of symptoms for people. So magnesium helps lower those, helps also block the thing that causes cramps. So I love magnesium glycinate leading into your period, and you take it maybe 10 to 12 days leading into your cycle. But that second half of the cycle is when a lot of people experience a lot of symptoms if they don't detox well. Ovulation, if people have symptoms around that, typically have histamine issues, because estrogen rises and estrogen can trigger histamine releases for people that are intolerant to histamine or don't clear histamine very well. So we'll experience itching, flushing, runny nose, sometimes bloating, sometimes cramping, more allergy type symptoms. So all of those are histamine related symptoms. And usually if people have histamine issues, they have more symptoms around their ovulation. versus leading into their period. So that's kind of like how your period flows, but you should feel a little bit different. If you have hormone levels, you're going to feel different. That's
Mhm.
okay. Like, don't fight it. As long as, again, it's not debilitating, can be very normal. And being sick, having a vacation and drinking a lot of alcohol that you don't normally drink, a ton of stress, all will impact your period. And so people might have like a really way off period one month. And I'm like, well, what was your month like? They're like, oh, well, I had a bachelorette and I had this weekend that I traveled and I was sick. It's like, okay, probably made your cycle a little bit worse. That's okay. It's feedback, right? So I try to encourage people to track things and then self-evaluate. Are my
Mhm.
symptoms consistent? Have I tried to bring anything in place? I have so many online documents around like things that can help with PMS and things that can help with estrogen detox, because those typically are what lead to, the cycle symptoms leading into the period, unless we're dealing with something a lot more extreme like an endometriosis or adenomyosis, which is a whole different beast. But yeah, digestion is the last thing I forgot to mention that can sometimes change a little bit. So leading into your period, sometimes people experience more constipation because progesterone can slow down motility. So if you have adequate levels of progesterone, it might slow digestion. So you can, again, increase magnesium citrate, can keep things moving. And then the first beginning of your cycle, sometimes people get what we call the estrogen shits, which are basically like looser stools because estrogen can stimulate motility. So it like contracts your muscles of your digestive system and it can cause more diarrhea. So again, not abnormal, but there's things that you can do to kind of mitigate those symptoms.
Well, and you just gave us so much practical, tangible knowledge, which is so great. But what I love most importantly in listening to that, because someone might listen to that for the first time and be like, that kind of went over my head, but that's okay. Listen back to it because it takes
Go
time to
slow.
understand your body and you want to. But also, the most important thing that you highlighted, in my opinion, is the fact that things are supposed to be different, right? We are supposed to have these ups and downs and these flows and these cycles throughout the month. And what I see with the people I work with is they come in and they're expecting the same level of output, productivity, energy throughout the 30 days of the month. And it's just not realistic. Do you know what I mean? It's just not
Yeah.
realistic. It's not how we were designed. And quite frankly, it's like fitting the circle in the square peg, right? It's like we're trying to fit into, my personal opinion is corporate America is based on men's testosterone cycle, right? Versus women's. And it's like, but we're trying to have the same consistent output throughout the month. And we weren't designed that way. And it's like if you can learn about what's physically happening in your body, as you just so brilliantly downloaded onto us, in a way where you can understand how to work with it. Like, why, when you know your energy is, as you described, supposed to be lower at a certain point in the month, why are you trying to force yourself to now do more when you know you're not going to be as creative on the second half of your cycle, or you're not going to have as much energy? And then you come home and you're beating yourself up because you weren't as productive today, when, as again, you just explained, but that's how we're designed to be. So
Yeah.
learning to work with it versus against it. And like, that's why I think it's so important for women to become aware and then actually look into what's physically happening, right? Like understand, become aware of the different, like you said, track it, pay attention to your moods, pay attention to your sleep and your energy levels, and then go take it a layer deeper and be like, okay, so what's actually happening in my body and how I can support it.
Hmm.
Like it's just, it, I can't say it enough. It's just we're meant to flow differently than men.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the faster we embrace that, I think the faster our life, or the easier our life gets.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's kind of a superpower as a female. You have a different level of empathy and sympathy than men do. And you can also be very productive and very high functioning if you know how to biohack your cycle and, work with it and not against it. And at the very least, what I typically tell people is, okay, first half of your cycle, like you can include more carbs. You can, put the carbs around your training, train harder in the gym, push a little bit harder in business. And then in the second half of your cycle, pull back a little bit in terms of your exercise, give yourself some grace. Maybe you work a little bit more on, admin tasks in that second half, or maybe you schedule some more meetings versus like all of your creative time, and I also have people experiment because some people find that they do better with eating higher fat, higher calorie in the second half of their cycle because it keeps inflammation down. Other people need the carbs to kind of fuel progesterone and fuel the cravings in the second half. You need more calories in the second half of your cycle. Your body actually requires it. And so experiment with your diet throughout. There's a way that you can cycle sync your diet as well. So I always try to encourage people to experiment, and then always self evaluate. Like every month to a fault, I am week before my period, I don't feel as good physically, and I start to question, like, should I change things? Should I change my diet? And I'm like, no, I'm the week before my period. This happens every month. I need to stop overthinking things and just let things flow, because I'm going to feel amazing again in a week. Like, and so really try to buffer your decision making in terms of evaluating where you are in your cycle.
I have learned now that like a week before my period, my boyfriend can pretty much count on me crying about something. Like I've just, it's like clockwork, and it's usually something I will forget about as soon as the week passes. But there is going to be a cry fest for at least a day or two
Yes.
about, I think last month it was Office Space. I cried about Office Space. I was very torn up about it.
Yeah.
But, but like you said, it's a superpower. We feel
Mhm.
differently. We experience things differently. And it's just it's something to embrace versus something to be ashamed of, And again, the complexities of a woman's body is also something we should be proud of, because it just
Yeah.
I really do believe we're the superior gender, if I'm being honest.
I've gotten hate on for that statement I've made in the past, but I mean, we're just much more complex. And with
Yes.
that comes a lot of amazing things, and a lot of probably confusing things to the opposite sex.
hmm
Um,
Confusing things
but
to us,
yeah,
confusing things to ourselves too.
completely, completely. But yeah, my husband jokes. I actually saw that the period cramps have the same level of pain as a heart attack.
Mm,
Crazy statistic. But
very.
yeah, my husband jokes all the time. He's like, if I could have had our kids, I would. And I'm like, yeah, but you didn't. So I still get to hold that
Here
honor.
we are.
But yeah, it's a lot being a female. One thing that has helped me a lot in terms of confidence and joy and happiness level, because I, like anyone, have struggled with in the past in terms of like my mindset, and our mind is just so powerful, and it can take us down really amazing paths, and it can take us from really dark paths. And the crazy thing is that you're in control of both of them. And I've had some dark times in my past of questioning if I should leave the business and stop doing all of this. And, unfortunately, living my life on social media and our podcast can be just wearing over time. There's like never a break. Because if there's a break, then it makes the business suffer. And something that I've worked to do now on a daily basis, because we need daily reminders to change our perspectives. It's not like, oh, I'm going to be happier, and then we forget about all the things that we need to do and reiterate and create routines around to make ourselves happier. I remind myself every morning how proud I am of myself and how much I've been able to accomplish. And it's just, I have to tell myself I'm a badass every day, because being an entrepreneur and being a mom, not many people tell me that.
Mm.
I have to I don't have a boss. I don't have someone, reiterating good job or this is great work. And I think a lot of executives are in that same boat. And you probably got to that place being a little crazy in the head. Most really successful people are a little delusional. And with that comes great power, but it also comes a lot of self criticism. And that self criticism can fuel you, and it can make you better in ways, but it can also destroy you. And so I've had to be my own best friend and my own biggest supporter. My husband supports me. He's amazing. My family, is proud of me and all of that, but like they don't tell me that every day. And
Mm.
so I have to kind of be that for myself. And all the moms and executives and whoever it is out there, like, remind yourself how proud you are of you. Because at the end of the day, the relationship with self is the most important one we have, that and God. So yeah, just a little tangible reminder to
Yeah,
implement.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I always I always talk about burnout from the sense of like everyone thinks burnout comes from having too much on your plate. And what I've discovered in my own journey with all the people I work with, like the root cause of burnout is disconnect. It's disconnect from who you truly are within, right? And so there's who we show up as in the world, or who we think we need to show up as, and then there's the real us. And it's like that gap in between. That gap gets created when we make decisions, again, back to those micro decisions every day of not realizing how our lifestyles impact us. Every time we work through our lunch, every time we say, oh, I don't need a break, I'm just going to keep pushing, every time we take on another project when we know we don't have the capacity, every time you do that, it's like this self violation, this mini self violation of ignoring your true needs and what you want. And I think when you do that over and over and over again, just like you said, that behavior of like a high performer, it can get you to a point, like it's usually gotten my clients to where they are in life, or I'm sure yourself, even as a business owner, like there's got to be some self-sacrifice. But then when it comes at the expense of your constant well-being, it's like then eventually you wake up one day and you have the business and you have the family and you have the money and you have the paycheck and you go, why am I not happy? Why do I still feel empty inside even though I did everything everyone told me to? And it's
Mhm.
it's from these mini self-sacrifices that constantly happen. And that's why I'm so glad you brought up that point of like the relationship with self, because like when I'm helping clients through burnout, that's literally the process, is how do we bring you back to you? Right. And when you can become your own source of support, your own source of love, your own source of motivation, and being your biggest cheerleader, like it's not easy every day. That at least when you're the main source of it, anything from anyone else is just a bonus on top of it.
Yeah.
Right. And when we're talking about healing in whatever sense, stress, body, hormones, all these things, it really comes down to it, like it's an inside job at the end of the day, right? And all these other tools are just here to support you, but it really comes down to, as you said, the relationship with self. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's such a huge piece of the puzzle, like you said.
Yeah. And honestly, like a lot of times the people that we work with are so stuck cognitively in negative feedback loops and thought processes and things that, you know, one of the main characteristics that we require of a client is their willingness to be open to change. I personally hate these like victim groups on Facebook of like SIBO group or Lyme group where they basically just talk about how sick they are and what they struggle. It's like you have to believe that you can heal. And I get it. A lot of people struggle and suffer, and we see those clients every single day that come in with years of dysfunction and symptoms and quality of life that is just really awful. um, but you have to be willing to believe that it can change, that that is not who you're meant to be, that that is not the body that you were meant to live in. And that whole victim mentality and like I can't fit this into my day, I can't make this work, and it's toxic. And I see it firsthand because we've worked with hundreds, probably thousands at this point, of women. You see a trend of people that are believing that they can fix things and believing that, it's going to be hard work. I'm not going to discount that. You're going to have to make a lot of changes, and you're going to probably have to have someone take you through it because I mentioned earlier, a lot of times we don't have our best interest at hand. We're very emotional beings. You wake up one day and you see the scale go up or you feel a certain way and it's like jump ship immediately. This isn't working, when in reality it might be working, but you don't see how it's working. And having a guide or, a practitioner or whoever taking you through that process is, in my opinion, almost necessary in a lot of cases. But you have to believe that it can be fixed, that you can be fixed, that you are the one in control of all of that. You can have a guide for it, but at the end of the day, only you can fix you. So, the mindset piece is just, it's such a huge piece and can be a huge limiting factor for a lot of people if they are not in a place where they're ready to
Mm.
change.
Well, but also it goes back to what you said earlier about the mind gut connection, which I just equate to the mind body connection as well too, right? Like I always say, like mindset sees the opportunity, but your nervous system determines whether you capitalize on it or not,
Yeah.
right? And even if you want something so badly, if your nervous system's not in a place to receive the opportunity or seize the opportunity, you'll just stay stuck. And then you fall into that trap of what you just said of like, now it's like, okay, so if I'm not capitalizing it, something must be wrong with me. I must be broken, right? Like I actually can't do it. I'm the one person on planet Earth that this isn't going to work for, whatever the case is, right? But again, back to your statement, this is why we have to really pay attention to the way we're living our life and these little things, that behaviors that we're reinforcing, whether they're healthy for us or not, or they're supporting our growth or not. Like we have to be so intentional, and it's just, if with today's society, if you're not intentional, you'll just get lost in a tornado of mess, and you won't even realize, that you're in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was me. That's so many people that I work with, and it's,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that
Yeah.
up. So that's such a key point. Okay, I wanted to ask you, from your perspective of all the women that you've worked with, what is the biggest, like, what's the biggest bubble you want to burst right now? Or like, what's the biggest thing you see? And every time you see it, you just like, not this again. Or like, or you just want to give people a little bit of a head shake around. Like
Yeah.
what for you is that topic right now? Cause I imagine there's probably been lots over the years.
Yeah, I think there's two, and we talked offline about one of them, and one of them is hormone replacement therapy, um and I think the other is doing more and expecting that your body's going to respond. Um
Mm,
and I had to learn this the hard way. Like, I was truly addicted to exercise. Oh, just a brief background of my story. I competed in CrossFit at a very high level for many years, and then ruptured my Achilles, kind of ended my career, and then went through IVF because I didn't have a period, got pregnant, had my first, tried to go back to CrossFit because that was what worked, right? That was what got me. I had lost 50 pounds when I first started CrossFit and found paleo dieting and, all of that. And, um, the funny thing is, looking back at me doing CrossFit, like, I was super fit. I was 9% body fat, but I wasn't healthy. I was constipated. My thyroid was in the dump. I was not sleeping. I was moody. I was not physically healthy. I looked healthy, but I was not healthy. But anyways, after I had my first kid, I also was starting to grow my business. At that time, it was mainly just macros and, helping people with nutrition on kind of more of a basic level. In gyms, and I tried to train at the level that I had prior to having a kid and a business. Um, and it worked initially. And then I went through about an 8-week period where I gained about 15 pounds pretty rapidly. And I couldn't stop it. And I dieted harder, I exercised more, and it just kept coming on. And it made me really take a hard evaluation of what is going on, because no doctor was giving me answers. I couldn't help myself. I was also experiencing this phenomenon with a lot of women in their 40s who like weren't responding to calorie deficits like they should be. And it made me go down this functional path of, working with these more complex cases and understanding how hormones affect the body and how, immune system and inflammation affect the body in those cases. But either way, what I had to understand was, like, I was not metabolically healthy. I was not immunologically healthy. And I thought I was doing everything right. And I tried to keep going back to CrossFit. Like, I would take a break from it for 6 months and do just some bodybuilding, and like things would get a little bit better. And then I was like, okay, I think I can go back to, and every time I did, it got worse and worse. And I would get bloated and I would gain weight. And the funny thing now is I'm physically at a better physique than I ever thought I would be able to be capable of. And I'm doing, quote unquote, like, less than I've ever done in my life. I work out 3 times a week. I lift heavy, but I stick to bodybuilding, mostly machines, because the interesting thing is that machines isolate stress to your muscle belly versus like full body movements. Even, deadlifts and big barbell complex movements are very stressful to the nervous system. And so if you have a lot of other stressors in your life, like I do, I have 2 little kids and a business that's growing and lots on my plate. I can't push all of the soundboard stressors up. I can't exercise really, really hard. I can't eat less. I can't also work really hard in my business and be the perfect mom and the wife and all the things. Like, you can't do it all at once. And so I've had to really maneuver where I get my stress from. And so I just encourage women out there to give it a chance that less could be better. Because again, it may be driving more inflammation and swelling and puffiness and weight, right? So that's probably the first one. The other one is hormone replacement therapy. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to
Well,
clarify.
I just wanted to jump into that before you go to the next one, because I think I know for high performing women, that is a hard pill to swallow. That less is more, because we have been brainwashed, whether it's by society or just by ourselves, to think that, again, we need to, if you're not dying by the end of the day, whether that's in a class or after the end of your workday, if you're not spent, if your weekends aren't jam packed, then you're wasting your life away. You could be doing more. It's like, it's such a different perspective. But when you can learn to embrace that, like I still believe there's a receptive quality we have as women, and in order for us to really be able to like tap into that and embrace and like attract the things we want in our life, we have to create space for that to come in. But if you're constantly pushing full throttle, you don't have any space for any of that to come in. Right. So I'm so glad that you said that, because it's something
It's a
I've dealt
lot.
with and something I just see all the time. And just holding space for the fact that if we just took a step back and created space, what type of energy, time, joy, love, growth that could welcome into our lives,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh yeah, I have so
Um,
much more time now for like my work and what I really love with my business and my kids. Like my mood is so much more stable. I used to be the worst person to be around if I missed a workout that I couldn't fit
mm,
in. It would ruin my day, and I would be awful around my husband. Like I would just be not nice to be around. And the funny thing is I look back and like, yeah, I was lean when I competed in CrossFit, but all the women in CrossFit are swollen. Like, if you look at
mm,
a lot of them, even the top competitors, like, a lot of them are pretty swollen, and a lot of the women in the classes never really improved their physiques when I look back at the classes I would coach. Like, it was and now I see it so much clearer. And even for me, like, if I have a weekend where I'm 20,000 plus steps both days, I wake up heavier on Monday because my body is inflamed. And I've started to
mm,
pick up on all these trends. And it's funny because when I was in this world of like extremes, I would work out really, really hard and then go on vacation. I had these huge weight fluctuations that would happen. Like I remember going into my wedding, I was, 157 pounds or something. And then post honeymoon, I was up like 10 plus pounds from a honeymoon that was 7 days long, right? Like the inflammation management in my body was so awful. Now I've spent the last like month traveling, was not perfect with my diet, had some drinks here and there, like didn't exercise consistently throughout the week. So my weight has stayed stable. I've felt mostly fine.
mm,
Like because I've managed the inflammation, I have picked and choosed when I can do things that I know are stressful, when my body is not recovered enough to not do them. Like it's learning your body and
mm,
learning what is worth it and what isn't. Because that
mhm,
4 a.m. workout after a poor night of sleep is not helping you. I promise you that.
mm.
So it's just been really cool to kind of see how much happier and more stable my body is with doing less.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you touched on that. Okay, and then point number
Yeah.
2,
And then
the
point number two is
HRT.
hormone
So,
replacement therapy.
yeah, so
Um,
can you maybe give us, just for anyone who doesn't know what that is, a kind of a basic of
yeah.
what that means, and then your
Yeah.
how you're seeing it misused right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we go through perimenopause and menopause, we lose our endogenous, meaning like our internally created hormone levels, right? And so hormone replacement therapy can be either bioidentical or synthetic. I always and only prefer bioidentical, which is essentially they have recreated how your body experiences hormones at the receptor level. So they now have bioidentical hormones, which is basically just replacing what is no longer there. Because what we know is that, and what research is very clear on now, is how protective hormones are to our system. And that is in cardiovascular sense, that is in diabetic and metabolic sense, that is in cognitive sense. Like if you are trying to prevent Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, diabetes, high cholesterol, lipidemia, like all of these things, you need hormones, and you need them well beyond when your body stops creating them. It's why we see such a rapid increase in cardiovascular events in females, breast cancer events. Like hormones are also very cancer protective, believe it or not. And so hormone replacement therapy is basically the act of taking exogenous hormones. There are many forms of hormone replacement therapy. I can touch on the ones that I prefer, the ones that you can get from your doctor, and then the ones that you may have to pay out of pocket at a compounding pharmacy. But hormone replacement therapy is essentially just replacing what your body is no longer making, whether it is progesterone, estradiol, testosterone, or all of the above. So one thing that I have seen is that hormones have been touted as this savior. They are going to fix all of your problems. They are going to help you lose the weight. They are going to help you with your energy and your sleep and your, strength and all of the things. And can hormones help with those? Absolutely, they can. But when you do not optimize as much as possible your physical and mental health before going on hormones, and you just throw hormones into a body, I always say that hormones are amplifiers. They are messengers. If you send a messenger into a really messy situation, it's not going to be able to do its job very well. If you send a amplifier into an inflamed situation, it's going to make the inflammation worse. And so I am a huge advocate of, yes, take the hormones, but do what you need to be doing, whether it is exercising consistently, eating adequately calories and protein and healthy foods, hydrating, minimizing alcohol, monitoring your stress, right? All of those things have to be there foundationally for hormones to optimize, because hormones are an optimizer. They are not your foundations. And so it is unfortunate how many women I talk to that are like, I got put on huge doses of hormones. I'm also a big believer in low and slow. There are different opinions out there about this, but a lot of females are very sensitive, especially if you've been without hormones for a while. Like if you have lost your hormone levels and then 4 years later you bring in hormones, like your body sniffs hormones and it goes crazy. And so I really do, and you don't know how someone's going to respond until you get them in place. And so I would much rather start low and the person be like, I don't notice anything. And I'm like, perfect. Let's increase dose from there, right? That's a lot easier to fix than I put in a pellet of a huge dose on someone and they gain 10 pounds, they have awful bloating, they have all these symptoms, and now we have to wait for 3 months until the pellet wears off, right? So I much prefer taking one hormone at a time, and you can add them in quickly, right? It doesn't need to be like you wait 6 months until you add in the next one, like maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and see how your body handles it. I usually start with progesterone because that is the first hormone that goes for women, and it affects a lot of things. Even if you don't have a uterus, you still need progesterone for cognitive health, for mood, for sleep, all of those things. And then I like testosterone a lot. We have kind of an epidemic of low testosterone in this world for females, especially because so many women have taken birth control, and birth control very clearly in the research shows the depletion of testosterone that doesn't quite fully rebound for women. And so a lot of women are very low testosterone, which then affects protein synthesis turnover, muscle development, recovery, immune system function, all of those things. So love testosterone. And then I usually add estrogen last, or advise that, mainly because estrogen fluctuates so much in perimenopause that at lows of perimenopause, sure, estrogen can be helpful, but if you're adding estrogen to a high, it can make the high worse, right? And so there is a belief system of waiting until postmenopause to add in estrogen. I think it kind of varies for the person. It's very case dependent. But remember that hormones are not silver bullets. They are optimizers, and they can only do worth what the environment it goes into.
Mhm.
So that's a big kind of issue I have. And there's a lot of people that don't like me for that and think that, they can't survive without hormone. Like, listen, if someone is debilitating pain, dealing with, awful mood, there's more going on than just lack of hormones in those cases. And I really encourage you explore what else could be potentially going on. And maybe you bring in hormones sooner than later, but you're working on the other things too. So yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on hormone replacement therapy. I'm a big fan, but you got to be in the right situation, right time.
Right, but it's just like anything else. It's like epigenetics. It's like anything. Like what's the environment that you're putting said thing into? Because that's gonna determine what shows, right? Like you said, it's an amplifier, and it's like so. It's like if you take the hormones, but you're not working on the environment that you're putting the hormones in, it's like well, it almost feels like another Band-Aid again. Yes, supportive, they do their trick, but I say the same thing about any like even like wearable technologies or anything like that. I tell my clients, I'm like, if you don't know how to read your own internal compass of stress, who cares if you can rely on a watch? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And it's
Yes.
the same thing with that. So totally get that. Okay, I only have you for a couple more minutes. I want to
Okay.
ask you one last question.
Mhm.
What would be your top 3 tips for a woman who, let's say, is mid 30s, 40s, who doesn't quite hasn't spent a lot of time understanding her body yet, but she can tell something's off? Her weight maybe is a little bit off. Maybe she's got some digestion. She knows she's higher stress, but she has no idea where to start, right? Like there we've covered so many things today. If you could just say for that person who's just at the beginning of their journey of understanding, hey, what's going on, or asking some questions, what would be 3 simple tips you would give them just to start
Yeah.
understanding better?
Who? Um, One, take a couple weeks to a month to track your biofeedback and symptoms, and do it with your cycle if you're still having a cycle. And if you're not, still do it. So what I mean by this is we are very reactive humans, right? And I I love my clients, but I will get messages all the time of like, "Oh, I woke up today and I'm bloated more than usual." And it's like, "Okay, evaluate. Like, what did you eat yesterday? Did you sleep well? What was hydration like? You know, where are you at in your cycle, right? Because we feel the symptom and we overthink versus like could it have a very logical explanation? And maybe it's just a random one off occurrence. That can also happen, right? And so I really encourage people to try and track what they're experiencing and then evaluate after a couple weeks to a month like, is there a consistency to some of these symptoms? Like, could there be something more going on here that I need to dive deeper into? And then, if that's the case, yes, maybe find someone to help you dive into that or evaluate around what's going on. If it's bloating, if it's constipation, like, are there easy things that you can put in place, digestive enzymes, lemon water in the morning, evaluating your food intake and what you're consuming. Is it too much cruciferous vegetables? Is, like whatever might be going on. So I really encourage people to just pay attention to how they feel and track it just for a month, like consistently, right? I also encourage people to track their food for a short period of time because I think a lot of people inconsistently eat. So they'll eat healthy for a period of time, but then they'll also undereat, they'll overconsume, they're imbalanced. And tracking food just teaches you what's in food. Like and especially if you're eating healthy, most people are under eating if they're eating healthy because it's hard to get enough calories when you're eating vegetables and protein and, some healthy fats. Like it's really hard. I do it all the time. I'm like, track my food day for the day and whoa, I am at 1,300 calories and I thought I ate 3 full meals and that would be enough food. Like track your intake and figure out what you're taking in consistently, or are you super inconsistent and maybe you just need to be consistent, right? And then, I something that I really encourage people to do lastly is evaluate what drains you and what builds you. So
Mm.
especially as a business owner, there are a lot of things that I have to do that I hope not to do at some point in our business. And there's some things in our lives that we really need to work on getting off our plate sooner than later. And if you find yourself at the end of your day unhappy consistently, or, just like struggling mentally, emotionally more often than not, evaluate why. Again, it's that like self-awareness piece, because I think that a lot of us go through our day almost like in this storm of chaos and don't even take a breath to look up and think, why am I in a bad mood? Like, who did I encounter today? What was on my plate today? Like, whatever it might be. And again, finding that consistency of, oh, it's this person that I talk to every Monday that stresses me out, that maybe I need to part ways with, or maybe I need to find someone else to, like whatever it might be. And hopefully it's not your kids or spouse, but like it needs to be understanding of what is affecting you, right? Because if you want to live optimally, if you want to really feel good, you have to figure out what inputs are making that harder. And going back to the food piece, because there's one last that like I really like to give people tangible around diet. um a lot of women that are very stressed, high performing women snack and graze throughout the day, and they don't have full meals, and they don't take long periods between their meals, and they struggle digestively a lot. And then they maybe overconsume at night. And so something that I really encourage a lot of women to do is like try to have two, three, ideally 3 to 4 hours between bigger meals throughout the day. Can help with digestion, can help with bile, which helps with detox, can help with overall blood sugar levels, and overall weight management. So eating adequate, hearty meals when you sit down to eat, but taking bigger breaks and then overnight breaks between food. Because a lot of times when you're eating consistently throughout the day, you're constantly stimulating blood sugar release. And so it can make it a chronic like inflammatory environment, because when blood sugar is chronically elevated, it's very inflammatory to the body, which can make weight loss really hard. And so people don't think like, oh, I'm just going to have this quick bite of this food before I go into this meeting. And then after the meeting, I'm going to have half my lunch. And then an hour, I'm going to have the other half. And it's like, you're constantly stimulating blood sugar. And so I really try to have people plan their day around their food and give them almost like an eating schedule.
Mm.
To remind yourself to eat, but also to keep good spaces between your meals, which not only helps with digestion and motility, but also with blood sugar and inflammation.
That was so good, Becca. Thank you so, so
Of
much. This
course.
episode was jam-packed with so much information. So thank you for your time and your wisdom.
Yes.
And just before you go, please let people know where they can find you or any resources you want
Yeah.
them to check out. Just please share that before you go here.
Yes. So I am mostly on my Instagram, at the Hormone Queen. So I talk all things female hormones, HRT, perimenopause, stress, weight loss resistance, all the things, low libido, hair loss. And I am in my DMs. I am in my comments. It is not a bot. I am the one in there. So if you have any questions, you can find me. And I also have a ton of free downloads. If you go through my reels, I have ones on thyroid and weight loss resistance and PMS and perimenopause symptoms, all the things. So I try to put out a ton of free content. I have a couple small paid, $3 guides, but I try to give as much information as possible. And then I'm also the co-owner of a functional female health practice called Fit Mom. We are all virtual. We do work with people in Canada, and all over the world, actually. But that is where I help clients and my team helps clients. And then we also have a podcast called The Health Revival Show. So I'm all over the place, but mostly I'm on my Instagram.
Amazing. Well, thank
Yeah.
you so much for your time again. I appreciate this so much.
Yes. Thank
And
you for having
we'll
me.
catch you guys in another episode.